Hey Battle Ready family, think on this. Have you ever been blindsided by the enemy? Just like out of the blue, something, just kind of comes upon you. Maybe a bill notice, a foreclosure notice, maybe a past due or a doctor's note, and just kind of blindsides you. It's in this moment where I believe the faith is really tried. It's going from having the confidence in God, hearing from God, giving and speaking into other people's lives, and seeing God and the fruit and the revelation of God and being used of God, as a matter of fact, to all of a sudden one day you're just blindsided. But I want you to know that it's in these moments right here that you have a choice to make. You have two options. Believe, what the enemy is saying, or believe what God is saying. What lens are you looking through? Are you looking through the lens of the natural, which maybe even be facts at time? Are you looking through the lens of God's eyes, which is truth? If we look in 2 Kings chapter 6, starting in verse 8, the king of Syria was making war against Israel. And so what the king of Syria would do is he would set up camp in one area, or he would set up camp in another area. But God gave that insight to Elisha. God would tell Elisha, go and tell the king of Israel that the king of Syria is set up over here. And so Elisha would send word to the king of Israel and say, hey, don't go down this way, because that's where the king of Syria is, and he's making plans against you to ambush you. And so time and time again, Elisha was hearing from God, and what God was telling Elisha was with accuracy. And the king of Syria got mad, and he said, so he came to the captain of the guards, he came to those within his ranks, and he said, which one among us is for them? Is anybody in my camp for them? Which the king of Syria was saying is there anybody with the king of Israel? Has someone infiltrated my camp? And one of the servants came to the king of Syria and said, no, none of us. Said, but it's a man by the name of Elisha. God tells him everything that you do. So the king of Syria got angry with this. And so he said, find him, find Elisha. And the Bible says, so they went throughout the land, and they found out that he was in Dothan. And so the king of Syria assembled a whole army against one man, because the king of Syria was so angry that this one man was hearing from God, was getting insight to the plans of the enemy. And so now all the attention was taken off Israel and put on one person, the messenger. And the Bible says in chapter 6, verse 15 and 16, if you look, the Bible says, so they came to Dothan, and where Elisha was camping, and they encircled him. Now think about this. God told Elisha everything the enemy was going to do in regards to someone else. But when the enemy was coming against Elisha, God withheld that information from Elisha. And some might say that makes no sense. But you see, it's in these moments that our faith is tried and tested. It's in these moments that we have to make a conscious decision. Who am I going to believe? The Bible says in chapter 6, verse 16, that Elisha's master, Gehazi, came out, and they seen this vast army surrounding them. And they came in the night, blindsided. They came in the night. And Gehazi, he begins to tremble, and he runs into the tent, and he says, Master, there's a vast army that is about us. And Elisha comes out, and he sees this vast army, but is not moved. Even though God withheld from Elisha what the enemy was going to do to him, Elisha still was not moved, because Elisha was not looking through the lens of the natural. He was not looking in the natural, seeing this vast Syrian army surrounding him. Elisha was looking in the spiritual. And the Bible says there behind the Syrian army was the host of God's heavenly army surrounding the Syrian army. And Elisha knew, there's more with me than there is with the enemy. And even though God withheld from Elisha what the enemy was going to do, Elisha made a conscious decision to look through the lens of God's eyes and not the world's. Think on this. What choice are you going to make? Maybe you have gotten a doctor slip. Maybe you've got a note from an attorney. Maybe you got your bank account just doesn't look good. Maybe you have more bills than you do have finances, and maybe your relationships are on a crumble. But my question to you today is this: what lens are you going to look through? Are you going to look through the lens of the natural, which may be based on facts? Are you going to look through the lens of God's eyes? As the book of Isaiah says, whose report shall we believe? We shall believe the report of the Lord. Make that choice today. Whose report are you going to believe? Yes, having not enough finances to meet your bills, that's a reality. Yes, getting a doctor slip saying that the blood work came back and it's not good. Yes, that's the reality. Yes, your relationship may be crumbling. Yes, that's reality. But listen, that does not supersede the bigness of our God. And what we need to do is we need to take our eyes off the bigness of our problem, our current situation, and put our eyes on the bigness of our God. If we can really grasp for one moment that our God holds the whole span of the universe in the palm of his hand, then we would understand the bigness of our God. Listen, even though Elisha was taken off guard that this king of Syria surrounded him, it did not take God off guard. God already sent his army because God had Elisha's back. God's got this. When you're faced with adversity, when you're faced with these situations, you look at it and you say, God's got this. God knows exactly what's going on. This did not catch him by surprise. He was not looking over here and the enemy came up from the back. No, God has got this. Think on this. And there, in closing, there was Elisha's servant. You see, because even though one may see it one way, another may see it another. You see, Gehazi, his eyes weren't open to the spiritual. He didn't see the bigness of his God. He didn't see the bigness of Elisha's God. What he seen was the bigness of the army. But thank God that Elisha looked to heaven and said, Father, open his eyes that he would see as I see. And the Bible said that God opened Gehazi's eyes, and finally Gehazi seen the bigness of Elisha's God. Think on this. He holds the universe in the span of his hand. Think on this. He commands the oceans to stop at its borders. Think on this. He gave the moon and the sun, he hung them in its place, kind of just like in nowhere. He gave every stars their names. That's the God that we serve. So when Satan comes and you get blindsided by something, don't look in the natural. Don't look at the bigness of your problem. Look at the bigness of your God. God bless you.